it is our distinct pleasure to welcome Benjamin Katz to the program. Mr. Katz is an associate professor in the Department of Human Development and Family Science at Virginia Tech University. And, we have not had the opportunity to meet yet, Benjamin. I'm Connor. Thanks so much for joining the show today.
Great to be here, Connor.
And we really appreciate having you because what we're going to kind of dig into today, I think, is just so interesting. And a lot of it is in regards to the impact that the spring season can have on our brains. And it is such a broad topic. We're going to get into some specifics, but I wonder if we can just start out by just asking you to sort of explain your perspective on this unique change, where as we go into springtime, there are distinct changes to our brain. What are those changes and how do they occur?
Sure. So a lot of it comes with the things we can do in spring, right? As you have warmer weather, as you have longer days, you have more opportunities to spend time exercising outside, to spend time in nature, to do cognitively engaging and social activities outside. And those are all things that we know are good for cognition and for your brain.
I want to start with doing things in nature. When it comes to going out into the natural world, it's funny, we talk about this right after touching base with the Artemis 2 mission. It doesn't get much more natural than that, even though that's space and not the Earth, the world. But when we go out into our natural world, what does that do for us? What does that do for our brains and our bodies?
Great. So just imagine taking a quiet stroll through a forest or something like that, right? That's something where you have both the opportunity to kind of have increases in mood because it can be relaxing and peaceful, but also there's some evidence that in addition to the fact that you're getting exercise, right? You get cardiovascular exercise if you're walking quickly or running, but also just spending that time in green space. There's some evidence that actually being in nature can improve things like attention.
Now, we talk about improvement of attention, and that is something that I think a lot of people desire in a time where so much of society has been designed to shorten our attention spans. Immediate gratification is everywhere that you look. What is it about being out in nature that does help with your attention span? How specifically does it benefit that?
It's such a good question, right? And it's probably, again, not just one thing. They've actually done studies where people have just looked at pictures of nature, even or being in a forest or something like that, and that seems to help. But probably it's also things like exercise, right? We know that cardiovascular exercise, so going for a bike ride or a run or something like that, those are things that cardiovascular fitness is very, very closely linked to brain health. And so it's probably the fact that you're out in a peaceful space, you don't have some of those other distractions around you, but also the fact that you're able to engage in activities, like I was saying, that can really help boost your brain health.
Now, I'm wondering, and I don't know if this is a question that even has a scientific answer, but we talk about being out in nature and exercising out in nature. The benefits that just looking at a picture of nature can bring is kind of startling for me to hear. If you are, let's say that you're out in nature and you're just sort of sitting on your phone, are you still getting those benefits if you're on your phone but in nature? Sort of that combo of the natural and the built. What are the benefits that still can come to you?
Connor, you've actually described what would make a very interesting study because you have to counterbalance the boosts that we would assume or to think about getting in nature to some of what we know about can happen with being on a phone, which are generally more negative, right? Exactly. Like, you get more distractions, you have notifications, you may be doom scrolling or something like that, right? And those things can be not so great. So my guess would be that if you want to maximize your benefits from nature, you probably want to be avoiding being on your devices and your phone. Also, right, that's less active. You're probably not running a marathon if you are on your phone at the time.
And then when it comes to, there's lots of different types of nature. You mentioned specifically a forest walk. Here in Hampton Roads, it's a lot of beach time. You go out west and maybe you're more in sort of like the desert area, going through hikes through that sort of terrain. Does that have any difference on cognitive improvement and elevation? Does it matter what type of nature you're in? Are there differences based on where you are?
That's such a good question. There may be some. But those differences between different natural environments are probably less important than the distinction of being in nature, whether it's, like you said, at the beach, if it's a quiet, relaxing, calm beach without a ton of people, or in the forest, versus being in an urban environment where you have lots of cars and noise. and lots of other distractions there. So it seems like the larger difference is between being in the natural environment versus more of like an urban setting.
We mentioned how going outside can be such a benefit to the brain. And then during that winter time, there's so much less time spent outdoors because it's just downright uncomfortable. I know in Blacksburg, that's more true than in most places. I've spent some time in Blacksburg, and it is freezing in the winter time. You don't want to spend a whole lot of your time outside. Now, does that speak to, and again, this is another kind of strange question, would it be most beneficial for human beings if we maybe lived more like a flock of birds, and during those cold times, during the fall, during the winter, if we actually did just go find the warmth so that we can spend more time outside? Or is there also something to be said for kind of experiencing all four seasons?
That's such a good question. And of course, right there, again, we don't have to ask if what if, right? There are people that do that travel to warmer environments, right? Snowbirds and things like that. It's kind of complex because we certainly, have the expectations of having seasons, and that things like, as you get into the fall time, there's more dark time, so you may sleep longer. But again, that's balanced out by the fact that, well, in the spring, if you are doing cardiovascular exercise, that helps with both sleep quality and duration. So I think, from an overall perspective, seasons are definitely what we're used to. And there's certainly, I don't know, I enjoy a very nice fall day too. And being in Blacksburg, actually, we're having kind of even a chilly spring day today, which I don't mind. But overall, I think there's, what we know about springtime and summer too is just having more opportunities to be outside. Those are really good for certain activities that are good for our overall cardiovascular health, but also our brain.
And, I totally agree with you, by the way. And just so you know, when I asked that question, my producer kind of face-palmed a little bit because I phrased that in such a strange question. Now, in some of our communication before this interview, it wasn't just hiking and cardiovascular activities that were mentioned as providing these cognitive benefits. Gardening, bird watching in particular, both mentioned those activities where it's not necessarily a cardio thing, but it still is an activity outdoors. How do those provide their own specific benefits?
That's a great question, right? And again, it's multiple things. So actually, gardening can be good cardiovascular exercise, depending on what you're doing. If you're moving around a lot and lifting things.
Yeah.
But bird watching, gardening, right? There's also a cognitive engagement component, right? As you plan where to plant, use your executive function processes. Bird watching also, right, incredibly attentionally demanding. But also those activities can be social, right? So you may be doing those things with friends or working with a colleague or a spouse or something like that. And social engagement can also be more positive, right? So, you have both the physical exercise component. I mentioned cardiovascular exercise, but strength training, things like that are also very good, as well as opportunities for cognitive engagement and social engagement in those when we get into springtime.
You've had an answer for everything I've thrown at you. I wonder if I can I'm even going to maybe veer a little further into that sort of, modern techno-industrial cognitive issues that affect us. Do you feel as though when you're kind of surveying society, the way we live our lives now, do you think that there is maybe a lack of time spent with the mind wandering? Do you feel like that's something that we could all use a little more of? There's so little time where you don't have something in your ears or something in front of your face because it's so readily available. Is that something you would encourage, more time of people just letting their thoughts kind of go where they may?
That's a really interesting question. And, you've got the sometimes we think of mind wandering as being a bad thing, but you're right. That's not always the case. Having opportunities for reflection, opportunities where you don't have other distractions, right? Those seem to be positive for mood and also potentially, as we were talking about before, for attention. So I think it's good to kind of balance it out and give yourself some time when you're maybe not doing anything too, because even better if it happens to be in an outdoor space where you might be able to get some exercise or go for a walk or something like that.
I think that's where a lot of creativity comes from, is sort of the absence of something that's taking your attention, and then your brain sort of creates its own things that will draw your attention. Now, a memory improvement was also included here in some of what was discussed before we got on the interview with you. All of this also helps memory, not just attention span, but memory as well. That's interesting to me.
there's some modest evidence for that. And one way to think about it too is things that improve attention may also help with memory, right? In order for you to make memories, you need to be able to attend to the things that you're later going to be recalling. So there's some complex things going on there, but absolutely, there's a little bit of evidence that time spent outside is helpful for that, but especially cardiovascular exercise, things like that. There's some evidence that can help with memory too.
Okay, so it's officially the springtime here. We've got a great weekend coming up. Get outside and get moving. It sounds like that's sort of the ultimate advice that you kind of would offer here based on your studies. Is there anything else that you want to add before we let you go?
No, exactly. Every season has its qualities, but as you have more daylight, right, make sure you're spending some time outside and better, yeah, exactly. As you're saying, even if you can get your heart pumping, especially, that type of exercise is kind of the best thing you can do, not only for cardiovascular health, but also remember it can help a lot with brain health too.
Fantastic. This has been really interesting. I so much enjoy having you come on and join us for a little bit. That's Benjamin Katz from Virginia Tech University, the Department of Human Development and Family Science. Thanks for hanging with us. We're definitely going to make sure we get outside a little bit this weekend after talking to you, and have a great Wednesday.
Thanks for having me, Connor.
All right, so a more unique topic than we typically discuss here on Live Impact News. Something that could be beneficial to every one of us, something that every one of us can do. We just had that forecast from Craig Moeller, mid-70s and sunny this weekend. Maybe try to get outside, get a little bit of activity in while you're out there, clear your mind, help your body. So many benefits, as we just heard from that interview.